Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Steve and Daisy, written by Upgrayeddddd.
Councillor Brax, we have finished the signal analysis of the destruction of the suppression field around the Terran homeworld, chittered Science Officer Chuxel.
Good, said Brax, his voice peaked. The fleet admirals need to know how the humans managed to take out an orbital platform without electricity.
T-minus 5 minutes to launch,
yelled the operator, his voice nearly unintelligible through the long pipe that connected the local launch coordinates to the capsule. Gyro spin-up lines pressurized. Colonel Steve Brockton reached above his head and opened up a small brass valve. Compressed air hissed through the lines, and several of the pitch and heading indicators fluttered madly for a moment. And carved lettering 0, 90, 180, and 270. Nearly perfect, with only a slight scratch inside the 8, betraying the fact that the device had been created entirely by hand. Since the Chimmer had decided to isolate, trap humanity by ruining electricity planet-wide, everything was handmade. Steve tapped the steam pressure gauge, steady at 3,000 kPa. The residual heat from the repurposed plutonium weapon core heated the 200-liter tank of water just behind his back. After launch, he would pull the separator rod, allowing the halves to come closer to each other. Hovering near critically, the nuclear steam reactor would provide 100 kilowatts of thrust and computer for 60 minutes. Then the water would run out.
Councillor, it appears the suppression station number 1 has destroyed in a nuclear detonation.
What? Roared Brax. How did they achieve nuclear launch, impact, and detonation without electricity?
T-minus 60 seconds to launch, came the voice through the tube. Umbilical detachment underway.
Steve simultaneously squeezed the control stick and tried to relax the rest of his body. He felt the airflow through the cramped cockpit quite to a distressing nothing as the air suddenly felt thick. The echoes from the voice tube cut out as he saw the cable gantry crawl away. And riveted iron lurching under hydraulic pressure. Arcing from the suppression field, snapping miniature lightning between the gantry and the rocket as it detached. The field, as it was called, was, as far as they could tell, a continuous EMP generated by 2 alien platforms, orbiting opposite each other 500 kilometers up. The enormous current snapping through the ionosphere fried everything from computer chips to power lines. Somehow, even more distressing to the science teams, the effect penetrated Faraday cages. Was it gravitational? Somehow strong force nuclear. With the steam age tools, no one had been able to figure it out, so the problem was to be solved with violence.
Sir, it appears the humans have launched a manned spacecraft into low orbit. The craft was armed.
The tiny gyroscopic timer on the right side of the cockpit kept the countdown. The tiny window in front of him showed pure blue sky. The one above his head, he was on his back, showed a tower lurched to the halt. 5-second countdown, Colonel Brockton pulled the separator rod, and he could taste the plutonium grow white hot. They said he might notice it, but the finality of those doses was discerning. Steam billowed out of the sides of the capsule portion, and a maniacal clicking dominated the cabin noise as the flight computer spun up. Handmade logic discs of beryllium, fused silica control rods only a few hairs thick, and a program tape of carbon fiber began to crunch his position on the second 16-bit computer created on Earth since the suppression. How did it get into space? How did it carry weapons? How did it guide the projectiles?
Scans of the craft before destruction of the second station did not detect sufficient shielding to prevent electrical suppression. It seems that the humans launched the spacecraft with entirely mechanical means. The weapons, some sort of torpedo, did not alter course after launch.
Why didn't the defenses shoot them down?
We only detect projectiles in post-analysis due to their wake. They did not have any active guidance, and they were strongly absorbing to our active sensors.
Steve's teeth chattered violently under the thrust. The pogo oscillating from the untested rocket threatened to shake the entire thing apart as the clock approached time for Qmax, maximum dynamic pressure. Wild movements of the control stick with both hands directed high-pressure steam to the hydraulic steering converters. his eyes pegged on the steering target gimbal controlled by the mechanical flight computer. "Come on, Daisy, hold together!" Steve yelled at the computer as the backup gyro exploded from being forced off of its dual bearing by vibrations. He winced as a piece of plastic, at least it's not glass, he thought, cut his cheek. But the computer held together. Slowly, the worst of the vibrations decayed as the viewport showed the blackness of space. A spring-loaded balance needle, a G-force meter, inched down past the blue line as the thrust of the solid rocket main stage burnt out. Steve reached down between his legs with both hands and pulled the red lever with both hands, and a faint smell of burnt gunpowder trickled his nose. Less than a second later, a loud bang shook the cockpit as the explosive bolt separated the main stage. The colonel folded his hands on his chest as the second stage lit, the G-forces pushing his eyes back into his skull. The G indicator pushed up above the red HG line for a few seconds as darkness crept in. The second stage thrust was higher than planned. Likely, the computer kept updating his course, and the 4 Gs he could reach the stick again and keep the pip on target. "What do you mean, Wake?"
The torpedoes appeared to use nuclear fuel. Plutonium decayed products, as well as chlorine atomic spectra were detected. Our best guess is that they were nuclear saltwater rockets, and they achieved just over 50 Gs of acceleration.
"Oh, curse the founders! They used mechanical nuclear devices!"
Steve held the pip on target as the final thrust died down. The launch was timed to be on the horizon between the suppression stations to conceal as much as possible. He had 10 minutes to catch up. Clicking, hissing, whining, creaking, bobbling noises filled his ears. He pulled down the targeting periscope and turned the valve to deploy the weapon rails. A reassuring clunk and a tiny mechanical green flag indicated that both sights deployed. His eyes went back to the clock. At T plus 15 minutes, he double-checked his heading, still in the green, and peered into the eyepiece. The first flash was a second later, less than 1 degree off-center. Magnesium bombs were set off above the parabolic reflectors in the Arizona desert below to shine on the alien station like a giant flashlight. Once per second for 30 seconds. Steve gently muscled the control stick left, and high-pressure steam tilted the craft to line up with the crosshair on the target. Steve pulled the trigger and the stick and started counting backwards from 30 on each flash. 29, 28. Daisy screamed into high gear as the fire control computer gyros integrated target motion, platform motion, and simulated orbital trajectory. Steve watched the purely analog solution projection needle start to climb from 0 rapidly to 30, 40, 50. 5, 4, 3. The solution was above 95%. 1, 0. As the last flash from below made the tiny alien star blink far ahead of him, Steve pulled the second trigger, and the torpedo was away. "And what of the wreckage of the station?" "We assume the humans have salvaged it. The stator is over 10 years old."
I was not aware of the delay. Why in Rylock's name happened?"
"The priority header of the last dispatch was corrupted. It was automatically reflagged as no priority and wasn't discovered until an order 12 days ago."
"Oh, no."
It was impossible to see the impact directly due to the window angle, as the ship rotated away to this point, but Steve's heart leapt as he saw the shadow from the flash. "Holy crap," he thought. The timer ticked down until the second firing window. 30 minutes. His heart was pounding too hard for this. The stale cabin air pickled his sweat as the droplets beaded around his eyes. He cracked the oxygen bottle for a moment and relished a few seconds of cool air in the face. A messenger ran up to the scientist and counselor. "Sirs, priority message from command. We have multiple unscheduled in-system jump signatures." Steve watched the gyro timer wind down to the last marking and peered through the scope again. Nothing. Still nothing. The flash array in China Highland should be firing by now. "The fucking Chinese! Goddamn feckers! We should never trust—" Plash! "Oh, you beautiful sons of bitches!" Steve shouted to no one. Steve pulled the valve to spin up the torpedo gyros.
The gas pressure also popped out of the safety plug, keeping the uranium shells apart. The gun-type detonation mechanism was purely based on impact, so you wouldn't want it to collapse during its launch vibrations. The craft slewed sluggishly on target as he pulled the trigger, and Daisy sprung to life again. The firing solution craft quickly came up to 50% as the crosshairs tracked the tiny flashes. 20, 19, 19, come on! As the pressure stopped, he released the trigger as he avoided importing false starter as the target window swept slowly by. No, 18, finally, 17, 16. But then again it stopped at 5. Steve willed the solution above 80%, but it would only started slowly descending. As the timer dinged the end of the illumination window, Steve prayed and pulled the firing trigger. A burst of gas popped in the control disk and the rocket motor, and a heavy spring squirted a solution of plutonium salt water onto a tiny boron carbide straws into a reaction chamber where the radioactive fluid quickly reached critical mass and superheated. The violently radioactive exhaust gas streaked out the end like a laser, and the torpedo disappeared into the black. End of story. I just want to thank the T5 patrons and channel members. Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnolds, Australia the Dreamer, Tryagain95, Fudic Yol, Meridian 117, Alithia, Jordan Bucksborn, Angry Marine, Albarden Gusta, and Barkey. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.